Have you ever witnessed someone's entire world crumble in a single moment? The story that unfolds before you explores the dangerous precipice of pride and the unexpected grace found in the depths of humility. It's a tale that will challenge everything you believe about success, worth, and the mysterious ways divine justice operates in our lives. Perhaps you've been the one looking down on others, or maybe you've been the one looked down upon. Either way, this narrative carries a truth that might forever change how you see both wealth and poverty, both mockery and mercy. The champagne bubbled like liquid gold in the crystal flute. Thomas Whitmore adjusted his Italian silk tie with practiced precision, the morning sun catching the gleam of his platinum cufflinks as he stepped from his Bentley onto Madison Avenue. At 42, he commanded attention with every stride, his charcoal Armani suit tailored to perfection, his salt and pepper hair groomed immaculately. The financial district hummed with its usual energy around him, but Thomas moved through it like a shark through familiar waters, predatory and confident. The homeless man sat against the cold brick wall of the Chase building, his weathered hands holding a worn leather book. Gabriel, though Thomas would never bother to learn his name, was 57 years old, his grey beard untrimmed but clean, his faded wool vest patched in 3 places. His brown work pants, donated by the shelter, bore the stains of countless nights on unforgiving streets. Yet his eyes, when he looked up from his reading, held a peculiar light that seemed at odds with his circumstances. "Mr. Whitmore," Gabriel called out gently, recognizing the hedge fund titan from his daily walks past this corner. "Good morning to you." Thomas paused, his expression shifting from indifference to amusement. He noticed the book in Gabriel's hands, a Bible, its pages yellowed with age and use. A smirk played at the corners of his mouth as he approached, his leather Oxfords clicking against the pavement with deliberate authority. "Still reading fairy tales, I see," Thomas said, swirling the champagne in his glass. He'd been celebrating another successful merger at the private club across the street, and the alcohol had loosened his usual corporate restraint. "Tell me something, old man. Where's your God now? Sitting on a sidewalk, reading about miracles while begging for quarters?" Gabriel's fingers traced the edges of the page he'd been reading, something from the book of Proverbs about pride and destruction. He looked up at Thomas with neither anger nor shame, just a quiet steadiness that seemed to unsettle the millionaire more than any retort could have. "I'm not begging, Mr. Whitmore," Gabriel said softly. "I'm reading and learning. Every day brings its own kind of wealth." Thomas laughed, a harsh sound that echoed off the building walls. Several passers-by turned to look, and Thomas seemed to feed off the attention. He pulled out his phone, angling it to capture both himself and the homeless man in frame. "This is perfect," Thomas announced to his growing social media audience as he started live streaming. "Ladies and gentlemen, I present to you the power of positive thinking. This man here believes in an invisible friend who'll solve all his problems. Meanwhile, I believed in myself, and look where it got me." He gestured broadly at his suit, his car, the champagne. 40 million in assets and counting. Tell me, Gabriel, yes, I heard someone call you that once. Where are your dividends from heaven? The crowd that had gathered produced a mix of uncomfortable shuffles and nervous laughter. Some pulled out their phones to record the spectacle. Thomas was known for his brutal business tactics and sharp tongue, but this public humiliation seemed excessive even for him. Gabriel closed his Bible carefully, his weathered fingers treating it like the treasure it was to him. "Mr. Whitmore, wealth isn't always what we can count in banks. Sometimes it's what we store in places rust and moths can't touch." "Rust and moths?" Thomas's laughter grew louder, more mocking. "You know what can't be touched by rust or moths? Digital assets, cryptocurrency, real estate investment trusts. But please, enlighten us more with your Bronze Age wisdom while you sit there in clothes that smell like disappointment and failure." A young woman in the crowd spoke up. "That's enough, man. Leave him alone." Thomas turned on her with the same predatory smile. "Another bleeding heart? Let me guess, you probably donate $5 to the homeless and think you're Mother Teresa. This man is here because of choices, bad choices. While successful people like me, pride goes before destruction, Gabriel interrupted quietly, his voice barely audible above the city noise. And a haughty spirit before a fall. Thomas's face flushed red. He downed the rest of his champagne in one gulp and tossed the empty glass into a nearby trash can with unnecessary force. You know what? You're right about one thing. There is a fall coming. Yours. When winter hits in 2 months and you're still out here clutching that book, remember this moment. Remember that I offered you truth instead of fairy tales. He pulled out his wallet, extracting a $1 bill. With theatrical deliberation, he tore it in half and let the pieces flutter to the ground at Gabriel's feet. There's my offering to your God. Let's see him multiply that for you. The crowd dispersed quickly after that, most people deeply uncomfortable with what they'd witnessed. Thomas strutted back to his Bentley, his driver holding the door open with practiced neutrality. As the car pulled away, Thomas didn't look back to see Gabriel carefully picking up the torn dollar pieces, not for their monetary value, but to prevent litter on the sidewalk he called his temporary home. That night, Thomas celebrated his cruelty with colleagues at an exclusive rooftop bar. He retold the story with embellishments, each version making Gabriel seem more pathetic, himself more clever. The video he'd posted had already garnered thousands of views and hundreds of comments, most condemning his behavior, but Thomas reveled in the attention regardless. Controversy, he always said, was just another form of marketing. You really showed that bum, his associate Marcus Rothstein said, though his smile didn't reach his eyes. Though wasn't that a bit much? The guy wasn't even bothering anyone. That's exactly the problem, Thomas replied, ordering another $300 bottle of scotch. People like him represent everything wrong with society, sitting around waiting for handouts, divine or otherwise. Someone needs to wake them up to reality. Meanwhile, 12 blocks away, Gabriel shared his dinner, a sandwich from the church food bank, with a younger homeless woman named Patricia who'd missed the distribution. He didn't mention the morning's humiliation. Instead, he read aloud from his Bible by the light of a street lamp, his voice steady and comforting in the growing darkness. "Why do you keep that faith?" Patricia asked, pulling her thin jacket tighter against the evening chill. "After everything? After people like that rich jerk treat you like dirt?" Gabriel smiled, his eyes crinkling with a warmth that seemed impossible given his circumstances. "Because I've learned something over the years, Patricia. The mighty cedar thinks itself invincible until the storm comes, but the reed that bends, it survives. That man today, he doesn't know it yet, but he's a cedar in a world full of coming storms." The next morning arrived with an unusual electricity in the air. Thomas woke in his penthouse apartment to 17 missed calls from his attorney. His hands trembled slightly as he returned the call, though he attributed it to the previous night's excess rather than premonition. "Thomas, thank God," his lawyer's voice was strained. "Have you seen the news?" "What news?" Thomas walked to his floor-to-ceiling windows, looking out over the city he'd conquered. "If this is about that video yesterday, the Securities and Exchange Commission raided your offices at 4 this morning. They have everything, Thomas. Every transaction, every email, every—" The phone slipped from Thomas's hand, clattering on the marble floor. He lunged for his laptop, his fingers fumbling over the keys as he logged into his accounts. One by one, they displayed the same message. Assets frozen pending federal investigation. Crack. The sound wasn't from outside, but from within, the first fissure in the facade Thomas had built around his life. By noon, the story had exploded across every financial news outlet. Thomas Whitmore, the hedge fund prince who'd built an empire on regulatory edges and aggressive tactics, was under investigation for insider trading, market manipulation, and securities fraud. The investigation had been ongoing for 18 months. But investigators had waited until they had overwhelming evidence to strike. Thomas stood in his office, or what had been his office until federal agents had sealed it off, watching through the glass doors as agents carried out boxes of evidence. His Armani suit from yesterday was replaced with a hastily thrown-on polo and khakis. His usual swagger had evaporated like morning mist. "Mr. Whitmore," a young federal agent approached him. "We need you to come with us for questioning." "I need to call my lawyer." "Your lawyer is already at the federal building. He's been there since 6 this morning trying to negotiate a deal." The ride to the federal building passed in a blur. Thomas's phone buzzed incessantly with calls he couldn't answer, texts he was afraid to read. His entire world was collapsing in real time, broadcast across the same social media platforms where he'd humiliated Gabriel just 24 hours earlier. The interrogation room was sterile, fluorescent lights harsh against white walls. Agent Sarah Chen. No, wait, the user said no, Chen. Let me correct this. The interrogation room was sterile, fluorescent lights harsh against white walls. Agent Sarah Brennan sat across from him, her expression professionally neutral as she laid out document after document, each one another nail in the coffin of his career. "Mr. Whitmore, these transactions from August show clear evidence of insider trading. You received information from Senator Hartley's office about upcoming legislation that would affect pharmaceutical stocks, and you made trades worth millions based on that information. That's not, I can explain. And these emails between you and several CEOs coordinating to manipulate stock prices. Would you like to explain those as well?" Thomas's mouth went dry. He reached for the water glass with trembling hands, spilling some on the metal table. The man who'd stood so confidently with champagne yesterday could barely hold a paper cup steady today. "I want immunity," he said finally. "I'll cooperate. Tell you everything. Names, dates, amounts." Agent Brennan's expression didn't change. "Mr. Whitmore, you're not in a position to negotiate. The evidence we have is comprehensive. Your cooperation might affect sentencing, but immunity is off the table." The word sentencing hit Thomas like a physical blow. Prison. They were talking about prison. By the time he was released on bail, his accounts might be frozen, but his attorney had scrambled to secure a bond through liquidating Thomas's art collection. The sun was setting. Thomas stood outside the federal building, no car waiting for him. His driver had been let go that morning when the asset freeze went into effect. His phone, returned to him after the interrogation, showed 47 messages from his ex-wife's attorney. She was filing for full custody of their 12-year-old son, citing the federal charges and the viral video of him humiliating a homeless man as evidence of moral turpitude. Thomas walked the 12 blocks back to his apartment building, each step heavier than the last. The doorman, usually so obsequious, barely made eye contact. In the elevator, Thomas caught his reflection in the polished steel. Hollow eyes, stubbled cheeks, his polo shirt wrinkled and stained with sweat. His penthouse, at least, remained his for now, though his lawyer had warned it would likely be seized as part of asset forfeiture if he was convicted. Thomas collapsed on his Italian leather sofa, the same one where he'd lounged that morning feeling invincible. His phone rang. Marcus Rothstein. "Tommy," Marcus's voice was carefully neutral. "I'm calling to let you know the board held an emergency meeting. You're being removed as CEO, effective immediately. Your shares are being bought out at market value. Well, yesterday's market value. Today they're worth about 30% less and falling." "Marcus, you can't. We built this together." "No, Tommy. You built it on a foundation of lies and illegal trades. The rest of us are trying to salvage what we can. Don't contact anyone from the firm again. Our lawyers will be in touch." The line went dead. Thomas threw his phone against the wall, watching it shatter into pieces not unlike the torn dollar bill from yesterday. He laughed, a bitter sound that echoed in his empty apartment. 24 hours. That's all it had taken. 24 hours from king to pariah. That night, unable to sleep, Thomas walked the city streets. He had nowhere else to go. His clubs had already suspended his memberships. His regular restaurants had his picture posted with instructions to refuse service. The federal charges were bad enough, but the viral video had made him toxic in a way that even white-collar crime couldn't achieve. He was the man who'd kicked someone when they were down, and now the universe seemed determined to show him what that felt like. Thud. His footsteps led him, almost unconsciously, back to Madison Avenue, back to the Chase building. The street was mostly empty at 3 a.m, just the occasional taxi and the ever-present homeless seeking shelter in doorways. Gabriel was there, in the same spot, his Bible open on his lap despite the darkness. He looked up as Thomas approached, and there was no surprise in his eyes, just that same steady calm that had unnerved Thomas before. "Couldn't sleep?" Gabriel asked, as if they were old friends meeting by chance. Thomas stood there, his polo shirt inadequate against the night chill, his designer jeans feeling like a costume from a life that no longer existed. "You knew, didn't you? Somehow you knew this would happen." Gabriel shook his head slowly. "I knew nothing, Mr. Whitmore, but I've lived long enough to see patterns. Pride really does go before a fall. It's not a curse. It's just the nature of things. Like building a house on sand instead of stone. I lost everything." The words came out as barely a whisper. "In one day, I lost everything." "Not everything," Gabriel said, shifting to make room on the cardboard beside him. "You lost what could be taken away. But there are things that can't be seized by federal agents or destroyed by scandal." Thomas found himself sitting down, the cold concrete shocking through his thin jeans. "Like what? Your faith? Your God who lets you sleep on streets?" Gabriel pulled out a thermos from his worn backpack, pouring hot coffee into a paper cup and offering it to Thomas. "I wasn't always homeless, you know. 10 years ago I was a lot like you. Not as wealthy, but comfortable. I was a financial advisor, actually. Had a nice house in Connecticut, a BMW, the whole package." Thomas accepted the coffee, its warmth a small comfort against the chill. "What happened?" "My wife got cancer. Insurance found a loophole to deny coverage. I sold everything to pay for treatment, but it wasn't enough. She died anyway. After that, I just couldn't go back to that world. Chasing money, pretending it meant something. I found something else instead. Poverty, humiliation." "Peace," Gabriel corrected, "and purpose. I volunteer at 3 shelters now, teaching financial literacy to people trying to get back on their feet." Ironic, right? The homeless man teaching about money. But I know both sides now, what it's like to have everything and nothing. That perspective, that's worth something. Thomas sipped the coffee. Instant, probably, but somehow better than his usual $40 a pound beans. The FBI has everything. Emails, recordings, transaction histories going back 5 years. My lawyer says I'm looking at 10 to 15 years minimum. That's a long time, Gabriel agreed. Long enough to become a completely different person, if you choose to. Prison isn't exactly a place for redemption. Any place can be a place for redemption, Mr. Whitmore. Even a sidewalk, even a federal penitentiary. The question is whether you're ready to stop being the person who tears dollar bills to mock the poor. Thomas was quiet for a long moment, watching the occasional car pass by. I recorded it, posted it online. Millions of people saw me humiliate you. I know. And you're still willing to sit here with me, share your coffee? Gabriel smiled, that warm, impossible smile. Grace isn't earned, Mr. Whitmore. If it was, it wouldn't be grace. It would just be a transaction, and you've had enough of those. A police car drove by slowly, the officer inside glancing at the 2 men sitting together, one in designer clothes, one in patches and worn wool. The officer moved on, probably thinking it was just another strange New York moment. I have a court appearance tomorrow, Thomas said. Today, actually, in 5 hours. Then you should probably try to get some sleep. On concrete. You'd be surprised what you can adapt to when you have to. Gabriel pulled out an extra piece of cardboard from behind him. Here, it's not much, but it helps with the cold. Thomas looked at the cardboard like it was an artifact from an alien world. 24 hours ago, he'd been sleeping on Egyptian cotton sheets that cost more than most people's monthly salary. Now, a homeless man was offering him cardboard for comfort. "Why?" Thomas asked. "Why help me after what I did?" Gabriel was quiet for a moment, considering his words. "You know the story of the prodigal son?" "Vaguely. Rich kid wastes his inheritance, comes crawling back home. That's the surface. But the deeper story is about two sons who both misunderstood love. One thought he had to earn it by leaving and making his own way. The other thought he'd earned it by staying and being obedient. Both were wrong. The father loved them regardless, waiting for them to understand that love isn't a transaction. And you think your God is waiting for me to understand that? I think you're waiting for you to understand that. The divine stuff, that comes later. Or doesn't. But either way, you need to forgive yourself first." Thomas lay back on the cardboard, staring up at the narrow slice of sky visible between the buildings. A few stars managed to pierce through the light pollution, distant and cold, but somehow comforting in their permanence. "I don't know how to be poor," he admitted. Gabriel chuckled softly. "Nobody does at first, but you learn. You learn which churches serve meals on which days. You learn how to stay warm, how to stay safe. You learn who to trust and who to avoid. Most importantly, you learn what actually matters. And what's that? Different for everyone. For me, it was learning that my worth wasn't tied to my net worth, that who I am isn't what I owned. You stripped everything from me yesterday, mocked my faith, tore up that dollar, tried to humiliate me in front of the world. But you couldn't touch who I actually am. That's the secret, Mr. Whitmore. They can take your money, your reputation, your freedom. But they can't take your soul unless you hand it over." Thomas closed his eyes, feeling the weight of exhaustion pulling at him. "I think I handed mine over a long time ago. Then maybe it's time to take it back." From the diary of Thomas Whitmore, Federal Correctional Institution, Otisville. Day 1. They gave me this notebook to process my thoughts. The therapist says writing helps. I don't know what to write except that the cell is smaller than my old closet, and my cellmate snores like a freight train. Day 7. Gabriel was right about adaptation. You'd be surprised what becomes normal. The thin mattress, the open toilet, the constant noise. Already my old life feels like something I dreamed. Day 30. First visitor today. Not my ex-wife or son. They're not ready, the lawyer says. It was Gabriel. How he got on the visitor list, I don't know. He brought a chess set. We played 3 games. I lost all 3, but somehow winning didn't seem important. Day 90. I've been assigned to work in the library. The irony isn't lost on me, surrounded by books like Gabriel with his Bible. I'm organizing the business section, seeing titles of books I once wrote forewords for. Maximum Profit, The Whitmore Method. Might as well be written in a dead language now. Day 180. Gabriel visited again. He's not homeless anymore. Some charity saw the video, the awful video, and was so moved by his response to my cruelty that they offered him a job running their financial counseling program. He wears the same patched vest, though. Says it reminds him of where he's been. The trial had been swift, the evidence overwhelming. Thomas's attempts at a plea deal had fallen apart when it became clear just how extensive his crimes were. 17 counts of insider trading, 8 counts of market manipulation, 3 counts of conspiracy to commit securities fraud. The judge, a stern woman named Carol Hampton, had looked at him over her glasses during sentencing with something between disgust and pity. "Mr. Whitmore," she'd said, her voice carrying through the packed courtroom, "your crimes are serious enough, but what truly disturbs this court is the pattern of cruelty and arrogance that seems to define your character. The court has reviewed the video evidence of your treatment of the homeless man, Gabriel Freeman. Yes, we know his full name now, and it speaks to a fundamental lack of human decency that makes your financial crimes seem almost inevitable. 12 years. That was the sentence. 12 years in federal prison, plus forfeiture of all assets obtained through illegal means, which was essentially everything. The Bentley, The penthouse, the art collection, the watches, the wine cellar. All gone to auction to pay restitution to the investors he'd defrauded. But something strange had happened during the long months awaiting trial, and then the first year of incarceration. The Thomas Whitmore who'd stood with champagne, mocking a homeless man's faith, began to disappear. In his place, slowly, painfully, someone else emerged. Day 365. 1 year. Gabriel says the first year is the hardest because you're still mourning who you were. After that, you can start becoming who you're supposed to be. I'm teaching basic accounting to other inmates now. Some are here for financial crimes like me, but most just never learned how money really works. Funny how I spent decades manipulating markets, but never taught anyone anything useful. Day 500. My son visited today. First time. He's taller, 14 now, voice deeper. He asked me why I did it, not the crimes, but the video. Why I was so cruel to that old man. I told him the truth, because I was scared. Scared that if God existed, if faith mattered, if there was something beyond profit margins and market shares, then I'd lived my whole life wrong. It was easier to mock than to consider that possibility. Day 730. 2 years. Gabriel comes every month now. We've worked through most of the Bible, not because I've suddenly found faith, but because I'm trying to understand what he sees in it. Today we read about a rich man asking what he must do to gain eternal life. "Sell everything and follow me," was the answer. The rich man walked away sad. I understand that sadness now, but I also understand I don't have anything left to sell. The transformation wasn't sudden or dramatic. There was no Hollywood moment of revelation, no speaking in tongues or divine light. Instead, it was a gradual erosion of everything Thomas had believed about success, value, and meaning. He started teaching classes in the prison, not just accounting, but financial literacy for inmates who'd never had bank accounts, who'd turned to crime because they couldn't see any other way to survive. He discovered he had a gift for teaching, for breaking down complex concepts into understandable pieces. Compound interest, he explained to a class of 15 inmates, using the prison's ancient whiteboard. It's either your best friend or your worst enemy. When you're investing, it multiplies your money. When you're in debt, it multiplies what you owe. The difference between poverty and wealth often comes down to which side of compound interest you're on. Damon, a 23-year-old serving time for dealing, raised his hand. "But Mr. W, how's any of that help when you got nothing to compound?" Thomas thought about Gabriel, about torn dollar bills and dignity that couldn't be purchased. You start with what you have. Even if it's just knowledge, even if it's just time. You invest that in yourself, in others. The returns might not be monetary, but they're real. After class, Thomas returned to his cell to find a package waiting. Books from Gabriel. Not religious texts this time, but books on teaching, on rehabilitation, on finding purpose after loss. There was a note. "Thought these might help with your classes. The men speak highly of you. P.S. Jeremiah says you still owe him a rematch in chess." Jeremiah was another regular at the shelter where Gabriel now worked, teaching job skills to men transitioning out of homelessness. The fact that Gabriel shared stories about Thomas, that Thomas had become part of the narrative of redemption Gabriel told, was both humbling and strange. Day 1095. 3 years. My lawyer says I might be eligible for early release with good behavior in another 4 years. 7 years total instead of 12. But I'm not counting days toward release anymore. I'm counting days of purpose. Today, 3 men in my financial literacy class told me they'd started saving, even just commissary money, for when they get out. They have plans now, legal plans for their futures. The 4th year brought unexpected challenges. Thomas's ex-wife remarried to his former business partner, Marcus Rothstein of all people. The wedding was featured in the Times social pages, salt in wounds that hadn't fully healed. His son's visits became less frequent, the teenager struggling with the complicated emotions of having a father in prison. "He doesn't even acknowledge you exist," Christopher said during one strained visit. "Marcus, I mean. He acts like he built the company himself." Thomas felt the old anger rising, the desire to lash out, to reveal all of Marcus's secrets, and he knew many. But then he thought of Gabriel, picking up torn dollar pieces, not for their value, but to keep the sidewalk clean. "Marcus is living his life," Thomas said carefully. "I'm living mine. They don't have to intersect anymore." "But don't you hate him?" "I did. But hate is expensive, Chris. It costs more emotional energy than I have to spare. I need that energy for other things now." "Like what?" "Like being a better father from in here than I was out there. Like teaching men who never had chances how to create their own opportunities. Like figuring out who I am when I'm not trying to be richer than everyone else." Christopher was quiet for a long moment. "Mom says you've gone soft. That prison broke you. Maybe it did. Or maybe it broke the parts of me that needed breaking. Like a bone that healed wrong and has to be reset." That night, Thomas wrote a letter to Gabriel. "You asked me once if I'd found faith. I still don't know about God, about heaven and hell and all that. But I've found faith in something, the possibility of change. You changed from advisor to homeless to counselor. I changed from predator to prisoner to whatever I'm becoming. Maybe that's enough faith for now." Gabriel's response came 2 weeks later. "Faith isn't about knowing, Thomas. It's about trusting the journey, even when you can't see the destination. You're on a journey now. That's all anyone can ask." Day 1460. 4 years. Something strange happened today. A new inmate arrived, someone I knew from the old life. Richard Hartley Jr., Senator Hartley's son. The same senator who'd fed me insider information. Richard's here for running a Ponzi scheme, something about cryptocurrency and promised returns. He recognized me immediately, seemed shocked at how I looked. I've lost 40 pounds, my hair's gone completely grey, and I wear the same prison-issue clothes as everyone else. "Tommy Whitmore," he said. "What happened to you?" I told him Thomas Whitmore died about 4 years ago. I'm just Thomas now, or Mr. W to my students. He looked at me like I'd lost my mind. Maybe I have, or maybe I finally found it. The 5th year brought a diagnosis that changed everything. During a routine checkup, the prison doctor found irregularities in Thomas's blood work. Further tests revealed liver disease, not cirrhosis from his years of drinking, but something genetic, something that had been dormant until the stress of the last few years activated it. "It's manageable," Dr. Patricia Sims explained, "but it's chronic. You'll need regular treatment, medication, monitoring. The Bureau of Prisons will provide basic care, but it won't be Mayo Clinic level," Thomas finished. "I understand." The news hit harder than the arrest, the trial, the sentencing combined. Death had always been an abstract concept, something for other people, older people, poorer people. Now it sat in his cell with him, a patient companion waiting its turn. Gabriel's next visit was different. He knew, Thomas could see it in his eyes. "How?" Thomas asked. "Dr. Sims attends my church. She didn't tell me specifics, just that you might need more support than usual." They sat in silence for a while, the visiting room bustling around them with other reunions, other conversations between the incarcerated and the free. "Are you afraid?" Gabriel asked finally. "Terrified, but not of dying as the wrong person, of running out of time before I figure out who I'm supposed to be. You know that homeless man you mocked, the one everyone saw on that video? You? That wasn't me. That was who you needed me to be for your story. Just like the millionaire with champagne wasn't really you. We were both playing parts. The real us? We're here now, having this conversation, 2 men who've lost everything and found something else. What did we find?" Gabriel smiled. "I'm still figuring that out, but I think it might be grace." Day 1825. 5 years. The medication makes me tired, but I'm still teaching, still learning. Today, one of my former students, Marcus, not Rothstein, Marcus Johnson, sent a letter. He's out, working construction, has a savings account. He included a photo of his daughter, born 3 months ago. I want her to know her daddy understands money, he wrote. Not to worship it, but to use it. Tool, not master. Like you taught. Day 2000, 5.5 years, had what the doctor calls an episode last week. Woke up in the infirmary, Gabriel sitting beside my bed. How he got permission for that, I don't know. He had his Bible but didn't read from it. Instead, he told me stories about the shelter, about men finding jobs, staying clean, rebuilding relationships with their children. Your students come to us sometimes, he said. The ones who get out. They mention you, how you prepared them. I told him I was just teaching basic math. No, he said, you're teaching them they're worth investing in. That's not math. That's gospel. The 6th year brought early release. Not because of the original good behavior protocols, but on compassionate release, due to his medical condition. The liver disease had progressed faster than expected, and the Bureau of Prisons decided that continuing incarceration served no purpose for a dying man who posed no threat to society. Thomas stood outside the prison gates with a single bag containing his few possessions, notebooks filled with lesson plans, letters from former students, a Bible Gabriel had given him that he'd never quite managed to read all the way through, and the chess set they'd played with for 6 years. Gabriel was there, of course, driving a beat-up Toyota that was a far cry from both the Bentley and the cardboard on Madison Avenue. Where to? Gabriel asked. Thomas had given this considerable thought. He had no home, no assets, no family willing to take him in. The shelter, I suppose. If you have room. We always have room. But I had another thought. There's a halfway house specifically for white-collar criminals transitioning back to society. It's run by a friend of mine, someone who went through something similar to you. You could teach there, help others navigate what you're navigating. From millionaire to halfway house resident. The final fall. Or the first rise, Gabriel countered. Depends on how you look at it. The halfway house was in Brooklyn, a converted brownstone that had seen better days, but carried a dignity in its worn edges. The director, Angela Morrison, had served 5 years for embezzlement before turning her life around. She greeted Thomas with a knowing smile. Gabriel's told me about you. The video man. Thomas winced. That's my legacy, isn't it? That moment of cruelty. For some people, maybe. But Gabriel also told me about your classes in Otisville, about the men you taught, the ones who come to his shelter with actual plans instead of just desperation. That's a legacy, too. His room was small. A single bed, a desk, a window that looked out on a brick wall. But it was his, in a way the penthouse had never been. The penthouse had been a statement, a trophy. This room was just a room, and somehow that made it more real. Day 1. Outside. Strange to not number this from incarceration, but from freedom. Though I'm not sure I'm free yet. The halfway house has rules, curfews, requirements. But I can walk to the corner store. I can choose what to eat for breakfast. I can teach without asking permission. Angela wants me to start a financial literacy program here. These men know how to move money illegally, she said. Teach them to do it legally. I start tomorrow. Day 30. Outside. The classes are different here. These men aren't hardened by street crime but by shame. They had everything and lost it like me, but unlike me, most still don't understand why. They blame the system, the lawyers, their partners, anyone but themselves. I was them once. Maybe I can help them become who I've become, though I'm still not sure who that is. Day 90. Outside. Christopher visited today. He's 18 now, heading to college in the fall. Not Harvard like I'd planned for him, but State University studying education. I want to teach, he said, like you do now. I cried after he left. First time since this all started. The financial literacy program at the halfway house grew beyond anything Thomas had imagined. Word spread through the network of white-collar former inmates, and soon he was teaching 3 classes a day, helping men who'd once moved millions understand how to manage hundreds. It's not about the amount, he told them repeatedly. It's about the relationship. Are you serving money or is it serving you? One student, a former CFO named Harrison Wells, challenged him. Easy for you to say now when you have nothing. But when you had everything, you served money completely. You're right, Thomas admitted, and look where it got me. But more importantly, look where it got the people around me. My cruelty to Gabriel, broadcast to the world. My son, ashamed of his father. My investors, defrauded. When money becomes your god, you sacrifice everything else on its altar. So, what's your god now? Harrison pressed. Thomas thought about it. I don't know. Maybe just the possibility of tomorrow being better than today. Not in wealth, but in worth. Maybe that's enough. After class, Thomas found Gabriel waiting for him in the halfway house's small garden. Really just a patch of green with 2 benches, but carefully tended by the residents. I have news, Gabriel said. Remember the video? Our video. Thomas's stomach clenched. How could I forget? Someone made a documentary about it. About us. They want to interview both of us. Tell the whole story. The rise, the fall, the whatever this is. The aftermath? The redemption, they're calling it. Thomas laughed bitterly. I'm not redeemed, Gabriel. I'm just less terrible than I was. Maybe that's what redemption looks like. Not a destination, but a direction. They sat in comfortable silence, watching the sun set between the Brooklyn buildings. Finally, Thomas asked the question he'd been carrying for months. Do you forgive me? Really forgive me? For what I did that day? Gabriel turned to look at him directly. I forgave you before you asked. Actually, I forgave you while you were doing it. How? Why? Because I saw myself in you. The man I was before I lost everything, proud, certain, cruel in my certainty. When you mocked my faith, you were really mocking your own fear that maybe, just maybe, there was something more important than what you'd built your life on. I forgave you because I knew that fear. I'd lived it. And now I see a teacher, a man who turns his mistakes into lessons for others. A father trying to reconnect with his son. A human being choosing to be better today than yesterday. What's to forgive in that? Day 180, outside. The documentary crew came today. They wanted to recreate the scene, have me stand over Gabriel with champagne. I refused. Some moments shouldn't be recreated, only remembered as warnings. Instead, we sat together on the same corner where it happened. Gabriel read from Proverbs again, the same passage about pride and falling. This time, I listened. Day 200, outside. The liver is getting worse. Doctor says maybe a year, maybe 2. Gabriel asked if I wanted to pray about it. I said I didn't know how. Just talk, he said, like you're talking to someone who already knows everything but wants to hear it in your words anyway. I tried, felt foolish, but also felt heard? Maybe that's imagination. Maybe not. Does it matter? The documentary aired on a streaming platform 8 months after filming. Pride and Fall, a modern parable, became an unexpected hit, not because of sensationalism, but because of its quiet humanity. The filmmakers had captured something neither Thomas nor Gabriel expected. Not just a story of riches to rags, but of transformation that transcended material circumstances. The final scene showed them on Madison Avenue, the same corner where the original confrontation had occurred. But instead of champagne and mockery, there was coffee and conversation. Thomas, thin from illness, but somehow more solid than he'd been at his most powerful, teaching a small group of homeless men basic budgeting. Gabriel beside him, translating the concepts for those who struggled with English. See, compound interest is like planting seeds, Thomas explained, his voice weaker but warmer than in his corporate days. You might start with almost nothing, but with patience and time, it grows. One of the men, new to the streets and still carrying the shock of it in his eyes, asked, "What if you've got no money to save?" Thomas smiled, the expression transforming his gaunt face. Then you save something else. Knowledge, skills, relationships, dignity. Those compound too. After the documentary aired, letters poured in. Some were hate mail from people who thought Thomas had gotten off too easy. But many were from people who saw themselves in his story. Successful people afraid of falling. Fallen people afraid they couldn't rise. Ordinary people struggling to understand what success really meant. Thomas answered them all, writing from his small room in the halfway house, each letter a lesson in humility and hope. Adored Day 365, outside, 1 year of freedom. Christopher graduated today. I was there in the back, trying not to be noticed, but he saw me, waved. Later he introduced me to his girlfriend. "This is my father," he said. "Not my criminal father or my formerly rich father. Just father, that's all, that's everything." Thomas's health continued to decline, but his teaching intensified. He developed a curriculum that was adopted by halfway houses across the state. Financial literacy, not just as money management, but as life philosophy. He called it true wealth, and it had nothing to do with accumulation. During his final class at the Brooklyn halfway house, too weak to stand but still determined to teach, Thomas sat in a wheelchair Gabriel had somehow procured, probably from the shelter's donation pile. "Gentlemen," he said, his voice barely above a whisper but carrying through the room, "let me tell you about the richest man I know. He owns nothing, sleeps in shelters, eats from food banks. But he has something I spent 42 years and $40 million trying to buy, peace with who he is." Harrison Wells, who'd become one of Thomas's most dedicated students, asked, "But don't we need money? Doesn't survival require it?" "Of course," Thomas replied. "But there's a difference between needing money and worshipping it, between using it and being used by it. I spent my life being used by money, sacrificing everything for more of it. Now I have none, and I'm somehow richer." "That sounds like rationalization," another student challenged. Thomas smiled. "Maybe, or maybe it's the first honest thing I've learned. Ask yourself this. If you got all your money back tomorrow, what would you do differently?" The room fell silent as each man confronted that question. "I'd give half away," someone said finally. "Set up a trust for victims of financial fraud." "I'd teach my kids about money before they made my mistakes," another added. "I'd remember that employees are people, not line items," Harrison said quietly. Thomas nodded. "Then you're already richer than you were when you had millions. You've learned what money can't buy: wisdom, compassion, perspective. That's true wealth." That night, Gabriel helped Thomas back to his room. The effort of teaching had exhausted him, but his eyes were bright with something beyond physical health. "I need to tell you something," Thomas said as Gabriel helped him into bed. "That Bible you gave me, I finally read it all. And I don't understand most of it, but there's this part, about a man named Paul. He says he learned to be content in all circumstances, whether rich or poor. I get that now. Not happy necessarily, but content. At peace. That's faith, Thomas. Not believing in dogma, but trusting in something bigger than circumstances. Then maybe I have faith after all." Day 450, outside. This will be my last entry. Writing is getting difficult. Hands shake too much. Gabriel is here, has been for 3 days. Christopher too. Even my ex-wife came briefly. She said I looked peaceful. I laughed. Peaceful me. But she's right, I am peaceful. For the first time in my life, I'm not trying to be more than I am. I'm just being. Gabriel's reading to me now, not the Bible, but letters from former students. Men who are working, saving, rebuilding, men who learned what I learned too late, but not too late for them. This is legacy. This is wealth. This is enough. This is everything. Thomas Whitmore died on a Tuesday morning. 2 years after his release from prison, 7 years after he'd stood with champagne, mocking a homeless man's faith. The funeral was small, but profound. Gabriel spoke, as did Christopher, Angela from the halfway house, and 3 former students who'd flown in at their own expense. Thomas died with nothing, Gabriel said at the service. No assets, no property, no portfolio. But he died wealthy in ways that actually matter. He died forgiven and forgiving. He died teaching until his last breath. He died transformed. Christopher read from a letter his father had written him just days before the end. "Son, I gave you nothing of what I'd planned. No trust fund, no connections, no empire to inherit. Instead, I leave you this, the knowledge that falling isn't the end, that wealth isn't worth, that pride really does go before destruction, but humility comes before honor. I leave you the example of a man who got everything wrong and then, by grace I still don't fully understand, got a chance to get something right. Love that doesn't count cost, service that doesn't seek reward, faith that doesn't demand proof. These are your inheritance. They're worth more than everything I lost." After the service, Gabriel stood on Madison Avenue, on that same corner where it all began. He pulled out his worn Bible, opened it to Proverbs, and read aloud to no one and everyone, "Pride goes before destruction, and a haughty spirit before a fall. Better to be lowly in spirit along with the oppressed than to share plunder with the proud." A young man in an expensive suit passed by, saw Gabriel and smirked. "Still clinging to those fairy tales, old man?" Gabriel looked up, saw Thomas in the young man's eyes, the same fear dressed as arrogance, the same emptiness decorated with success. He smiled with genuine warmth. "Just stories, friend. Stories about falling and rising, about losing everything and finding what matters, about grace that shows up in the strangest places." He patted the sidewalk beside him. "Care to sit for a while? I've got coffee and time." The young man hesitated, something in Gabriel's tone reaching past his defenses. He looked at his Rolex, at the meeting he was already late for, at the homeless man offering him instant coffee and wisdom. I can't. I have to." "You have to do what you have to do," Gabriel said gently. "But if you ever find yourself with nowhere else to go, remember this corner. Sometimes the best conversations happen when we've run out of important places to be." The young man walked away, but slower than before, thoughtful. Gabriel watched him go, then returned to his reading, knowing that seeds planted in hostile soil sometimes grow the strongest trees, given time and the right storm to crack them open. In the distance, thunder rumbled over Manhattan, and Gabriel smiled. Storms, he'd learned, weren't just endings. Sometimes, for those willing to be broken and rebuilt, they were beginnings. And somewhere, in whatever comes after, Thomas Whitmore finally understood the wealth he'd been seeking all along. Not in numbers that could be counted, but in lives that had been changed, in pride that had become humility, in mockery that had transformed into mercy. Grace, it turned out, was the only investment that truly compounded infinitely. The last dollar bill, the one Thomas had torn in mockery, still sat in Gabriel's Bible, carefully taped together. Not as money, but as a reminder. What man means for evil, something greater can transform into good. Every tear can be mended. Every fall can become a foundation. Every ending, properly understood, is just another chance to begin. On Madison Avenue, the rain began to fall, gentle at first, then harder. Gabriel pulled his patched coat tighter and smiled. He'd wait out the storm, like always. He had nowhere more important to be than exactly where he was, holding space for the next Thomas to fall, to break, to finally understand that the greatest wealth was never about what you could count in banks, but what you could store in hearts. The city moved around him, all its ambition and anxiety, its pride and precipitation. And Gabriel sat still in the center of it, a peaceful paradox. The homeless man who was somehow home, the poor man who possessed riches beyond measure, the mocked man who had already forgiven the world for not yet understanding what true worth really meant. Thunder crashed. Lightning illuminated the street in stark relief, light and shadow, rich and poor, pride and humility. And in that moment of divine clarity, Gabriel whispered a prayer of gratitude for Thomas Whitmore. The millionaire who had to lose everything to gain the only thing that mattered, a soul finally at peace with itself. The storm passed, as storms do. The sun broke through the clouds, painting Madison Avenue in gold. And Gabriel remained, unchanged, and yet forever changed by his encounter with a proud man's fall and rise, ready for whoever would come next, carrying his worn Bible and unlimited grace for a world that desperately needed both. This was wealth. This was wisdom. This was the fortune that no market crash could diminish, no federal investigation could seize, no mockery could devalue. This was enough. This was everything, and it always had been.